Good day, everyone. My name is Magnuz Engardt. I will be your host today. Alistair is out in the field with his students on a rainy Utö. I just talked to him. And today we have the pleasure of listening to Davide Faranda from CNRS in France. And he will talk about the attribution of extreme weather events to climate change. And I'm sure this will be a very interesting talk. I will be in the background if anything happens, but with that, I give the floor to you, David. Bienvenue.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Magnus, and thanks for inviting me to give this seminar. So I will share my screen and put this in full screen and reduce.
Yeah, it's perfect. Thank you.
Okay, wonderful. So today I will give you an overview of this attribution tool that we have developed mainly at the CNRS, at the Institute Pierre Simon Laplace. This tool is named Climameter. It is one of the tools that is helpful to perform rapid attribution of extreme events to climate change. So you can see that there are a series of logo listed here. I will just make a brief comment on this. The beginning of this climameter was in the context of this ExAIDA and ADP European projects. These are international projects with several partners that worked already in the attribution field, and therefore it was a nice way to start to see what were the needs in terms of attribution and which tools was needed to like complement what was already in the literature. And now let's say that Climameter is supported also in France by projects that are targeting more let's say adaptation and like short-term output of the climate system on the French and broader European context. And of course, having attribution results is helpful when we want to do very short-term planning, because we can understand what's the role of climate change on the disaster that have just happened. So after this, I will start by showing you it's time for lunch. So it's good to talk about cooking. And I'm presenting here this attribution kitchen. Attribution, first of all, is the process of determining the causes of observed disaster and put them in the perspective of natural climate variability or greenhouse gases emissions, or both. And I claim here, and I will explain for the next few minutes, that making an attribution study is like cooking. So imagine that one of you is a good friend of mine, and you offer me a cake, chocolate cake, and then I want to know if this cake contains butter, because I turned vegan and so I cannot eat butter anymore. But this friend of mine leaves, and I'm left with the cake, and I have to determine whether there is this ingredient or not. So I have two ways of proceeding. The first one is that I'm very rich, and therefore I can produce several cakes with and without butter that looks like the one that has been offered to me, and then determine which set of cake with or without butter is closer to mine. So this is equivalent to, for example, having an heat wave, that is the cake offered by this friend of mine, and then simulating with a climate model that is equivalent of a kitchen, the heat wave in a world with or without greenhouse gases emissions, right? That's the butter. This way of proceeding is very costly and still is prone to errors. First of all, because in a chocolate cake there is not only butter or whatever the vegan alternative that matters, but there are also other ingredients. For example, chocolate, the quality of the eggs, the temperature of the eggs, and so on and so forth. So if you do some cooking, you know that depending on your kitchen, you can have also different results. So the kitchen is the equivalent of climate model. The climate model you use really matters. And then, of course, there is also the role of the scientist, the role of the cook, because we can introduce errors in this procedure by, for example, pushing too much, overstating some results towards saying that the event is due or um, let's say intensified by greenhouse gases emissions, or if you are, for example, an oil company and you realize in attribution studies, perhaps, just saying perhaps, you might be interested in saying that there is no effect of greenhouse gases emissions. So the human cook that prepared the cakes can introduce some error, positive or negative bias. So this is the a first way of proceeding for attribution. There is a second way that is the one that I will comment more in Climameter, that is instead related to having a long record of cakes, of events, that we can compare to the one that we want to study, and we can separate the cakes in periods where the greenhouse gases emissions were stronger and periods where greenhouse gases emissions were lower, and therefore have, just by using the observation, a factual climate with CO2 emissions the current period, and a counterfactual with CO2 emissions of the pre-industrial period. So that's the way that we will use in the climameter. But before, I want to show you this. I'm sorry, the title is in French, but you can definitely see here that this plot that was from 2016, but still somehow old, show how well we understand the influence of climate change on event types in general, and then on the y-axis the same, but for a single event. So you can see that this is defined as a lower triangular matrix in some sense, where in fact we have more confidence on a class of event than just on a single one, but we have more confidence in attributing cold and heat event that can be directly linked to the global temperature, that is of course a function of the CO2 emissions, and instead the things that we can attribute with less confidence are those who involve more variable, or variable that have a scattered nature for which we don't have clear relationship, or an immediately a one-to-one relationship with the global temperature. And in fact, from these all these uh, set of events, the one that interests me the more personally are the severe convective storms. Is also my passion since I was a child, and right now, and perhaps I will discuss with you this in the question time or in another seminar. I'm trying to attribute the hailstorm that hit Paris a few months ago. So we are working on all these events, and now the question is how we can perform the attribution. And we come up with Climameter, that is a framework that I will explain in the next minutes, but is also a consortium of several scientists, more than 30 scientists now coming from all over the world. You can also join Climameter if you want. You can just drop me an email at the end of the talk if you're interested in joining. And the idea is that we perform attribution studies in up to 48 hours after the event. So this is extremely rapid, and it allows us to be in at the same time of the events, while there is still in the press some discussion ongoing about it. So it allows us to put some first numbers on the events that we want to attribute. So far we have analyzed over 70 events in 15 months, and we have several thousands press hits. These press hits are difficult to quantify exactly, because sometimes what happens is that one of our study is taken by a big press agency like Reuters or AFP, or others, and then the newspaper just publish the press release. So it gets easily diffused and we can lose track. And then, of course, what we can say is that um, um, I don't know if I will have time, but of course, from the report that we publish and the way the press report our reports, there is sometimes some distortions, and we can come back to this later on. So as coverage, you can see that we try to have a global coverage, but of course we have this north-south bias where we cover mostly events that occur at mid-latitudes and in Europe and in the US or in the developed country. While the global south we struggle, and this is also a call for colleagues that come from the global south to join our team and to strengthen the collaboration. So you can see here that there are different colors. These different colors corresponds to different class of events. This darker blue is related to floods events that we have analyzed. Then we have this light azure that is related to windstorm. Yellow is for heat wave, and violet is for cold spell. And then we have reds that we just start. We have just few of them, and these are fires. And the last event that we have analyzed are the fires in Canada. So I will explain you how we do, but for this event we can compute histogram where we detect the changes in terms of mostly strengthened by climate change, likely strengthened by climate change, enhanced by both climate change and natural variability, or influenced just by natural variability. And what you can see is that for almost all the events that we have analyzed, we cannot rule out that there is a role of climate change, so of anthropogenic greenhouse gas emissions, in augmenting the intensity of this event. Another output that we provide is the rarity of the event, from rare to very exceptional, and we can see that very exceptional events, so are events that for which we do not have records in the observation and for which our attribution studies will be low confidence, because the lower the number of good analogs of the events we have, the lower the confidence we put is still about half of all the events that we have analyzed. So these are the results. Now I have to explain you how we get to these results, and of course I will explain you a bit the framework of Climameter. First of all, in this attribution pathway, where Climameter stands. So at the bottom of the scale, we have the impacts that are the trigger of attribution studies. We do not study all the events that happen in the climate system, all the cyclones, all the storm, but we study the one that produce some impact. How do we do that? So all the scientists of Climameter, we are in a Slack that is joined also by our colleagues, journalists, that can observe what we do from a scientific point of view, but also suggest the studies that are the one that have some large impact. I was saying, like, the last study that you will find on the webpage is the um, Canada wildfires. Um, of course, what we do is that from the impact we can look directly at the hazard that are producing the impact, but Climameter is at the upper level, that is the level of the weather phenomena that are producing the hazard. Why? Because, for example, if we consider rain, rain can be produced by very different meteorological objects, such as tropical cyclone or extratropical cyclone or thunderstorm. Therefore, just by looking at changes in rain, we won't be able to say whether it's an increase that we can see in rain is because thunderstorms are getting more intense or cyclones are getting more intense. Sometimes we can have compensation phenomena. So for us, the right level to do attribution is the level of the phenomena producing the hazard. And if we look at the phenomena that produce most of the climatic hazard, we can look at cyclones, anticyclone, low pressure or high pressure pattern. That is the one that we identify in climameter. Going to this level is useful also because it allows us to tackle at the same time multiple hazards. For example, a cyclone can produce at the same time wind and rain or even cold. So what we do is that we look for each cyclone and anticyclone causing a certain impacts linked to a certain natural disaster, what's the role of greenhouse gases emissions and climate variability in these phenomena. So to do so, we use, as I was saying, I was explaining in the first slide, a methodologies that is based only on reanalysis. So the proxy that we have for observation re-gridded on by the climate model of the ECMWF, because we use ERA 5 from 1950 to present. The event for us is defined as the time average surface pressure anomalies map in a longitude-latitude box that fits the synoptic object, the meteorological object that we want to attribute because it's responsible of the hazard that we see. Then we split the period 1950 to present into two periods. The past that is barely affected by climate change, that for us is 1950, 1986, and then the present that for the moment is 1987 to 2024, that is highly affected by climate change. And in both the periods, we look for analogs, fixing the number of analogs to about 30, the same number for both the period. And then what we can do is simply um, conditioning to the analogs of pressure, looking on how pressure is changing present minus past, temperature, precipitation, winds, and all the other variables that we want to put there. So this is allow us conditioning to one observable to look at multiple changes at the same time and to have also special maps of changes. But this is not attribution because this is simple statistics. So what we have to do is that we have to exclude somehow or include or acknowledge the role of the natural modes of variability in this analysis. And so we will see that in climate meter we acknowledge and we study the role of the El Niño Southern Oscillation, the Atlantic multi-decadal oscillation, and the Pacific decadal oscillation in a, for the moment, simple way. And putting together the diagnosed changes, excluding or including the modes of variability and interpreting the changes in light of the physics of the climate, we can produce a rapid report. To show you how we proceed, I will provide an example that is a recent storm that hit in January 2025 the British Isles and France, sorry, with like very intense cyclone, a drop of pressure of 50 hectopascal in 24 hours, and extreme winds up to 130 kilometers per hour, with gusts reaching 200 kilometers per hour in Scotland, and leaving over 1 million people in the British Isles without electricity and significant property damage. So now you will see that the technique is very easy to understand. So this is our target. Um, the domain that we choose fits the low pressure system that is associated with the extratropical storm. And this is a daily sea level pressure map. Then we look for the closest 30 analogs that are the minima of the Euclidean distance in the past and in the present. This is the average of the analogs in the past, the average of the analogs in the present, and what we can do is taking present minus past and see if the difference are significant with respect to shuffling the dates in the two periods several times, and so creating a bootstrap sample. And for us, the physical significance is when we are two standard deviation outside the bootstrap sample. So you can see that for this event, when we do present minus past analogs, we have increase deepening of the pressure system over northern Scotland and a signal to increasing the pressure over continental Europe, which means that we have a stronger pressure gradient. This stronger pressure gradient, if we look at the second line, that is temperature, I will just comment on the changes, that is this H panel that I'm indicating with my mouse. You see that we have higher temperature over Norway and over the northern France and the Benelux, the entire United Kingdom, and cooler temperature in the mid-Atlantic, and this is coherent with having a deeper cyclone here that adbacks colder air on this sector and warmer air from the south. So you see already that we can interpret the results in light of the physics. Then we have a deeper pressure and a higher temperature also increase the precipitation, mostly in this area that is Western Scotland, south of Norway and the English Channel. We also see a signal of increasing the winds. As you can see, the signal is, yes, located near the pressure minima, but also on Brittany, and in fact, it's interesting to see that it's not an homogeneous signal, but it has a specific fingerprint. So this is the kind of change that we can diagnose. Then I have to explain you how we look at the role of the natural variability. So for this, we have the dates of the analogs in past and present period. So we can look at the values of the indices ENSO, AMO, and PDO in the two period, past in blue, present this orange. And we can construct these violin plots that are nothing but distribution of the values of the indices during the analogs in the past period, blue, and in the present period. Then we can see with red bar the value of the average, and with the black bar the values of the median. And we can test with the Kramer-von-Mises two-sided test whether these distributions are statistically different. According to this test, for which the results are reported here in the title, we can see that only the Atlantic multidecadal oscillation has a different phase from the past and the present period, whereas for the other two we don't see significant changes, although the p-value is close to the threshold 0.05 that we have fixed for the test statistics. And so we can acknowledge this role of the natural variability of the Atlantic multidecadal oscillation. And another thing that we can do in a similar way is to assess the rarity of the event that we have analyzed by comparing the distance of our event from the analogs, that is the blue value for the two periods, and we compare this from the distance of the analogs from their analogs. So somehow how this storm is belonging to the group of storm with respect to the other storms that are their analogs. And you can see here that this storm was somehow close to the median and the mean in the past period. Now it's a bit more to the edge of the distribution. So the event is classified as very rare. We will see how we summarize this. And in fact, here is the summary that we produce. This is the typical output of the climate meter. That is the one that you find for all the events in our website and also in our reports that have a DOI and are published in Zenodo. So the indicator related to the natural variability of the climate change is the one in the left-hand side meter. So as you can see, is a gauge plot that is in principle allow all the values between 0 to 100, but in this case, given our methodology that for the moment acknowledge only the role of these three modes of variability, how we proceed? We start from 95%, and then for each modes of variability that is significantly different from factual and factual period and counterfactual period, we move back the indicator by 30%. So in this case, we had only the Atlantic multidecadal oscillation that could influence our event, so we move to here. If we had another modes of variability, we would move here, and so on and so forth. And for the rarity of the event, we have an indicator that basically look at the values of these blue dots with the position of these blue dots with respect to the median in the two periods and assess the rarity. So this allows us to, in the future, for example, refine the methodology, but keeping the same visualization for which now the journalists are trained. And then we see the figures. The figures are organized in a first line that is now in the line the event. This allows us to make a first assessment of where there was a pressure system, how were the temperature anomalies, did it rain a lot, and if we had winds. And then the changes that you have seen that shows lower pressure, higher temperature on this area, increase in precipitation, and stronger winds. We synthesize this in a summary that we provide to the international press, and this summary is automatically written almost by once the figure is provided. So we don't have the freedom of choosing the title, we don't have the freedom of choosing the wording here. We have a pre-formatted set of possibilities that we use to avoid this type of error where we overstate, for example, the role of climate change or understate it. So we have published with the paper also a protocol, and the protocol tell us how we write the reports. So, where is our freedom left? The freedom is left in the way we choose the region that we analyze, and then we have to comment on whether we expect these changes based on the physics that we find either here or here in terms of dynamical changes or thermodynamical changes. So once this report is done, we provide it to the international press, and along with the report, we also write quotes, and in the quotes we can go um, like further in in depth on what are the implications of our studies for the society. So in the quotes, we are a bit more free to see what we think are the implications of what we've done for the societies where we live, and what are the take-home messages for the, for example, adaptation or mitigation that we have that the study motivates. So I go towards the conclusion, and I want to stress the key features of Climameter. So the thing is that we use these atmospheric circulation analogs to assess the event, how the event changes in a warming climate, and this ensures very fast attribution because we don't have to run models, and we have a very simple hypothesis that is that we can verify, that is that the current climate is more affected by climate change than the climate of the 50s, the 60s, and the 70s. So we have a physical interpretability because we can link the changes in terms of like the temperature is higher, so we expect more precipitation because of Clausius Clapeyron or other things that we can directly read on the data. And of course, it's best suited for the events that are dominated by the atmospheric circulation. And the limitation is that we depend by the reanalysis data quality, and also that we don't have models. Yeah, this is a limitation, but also sometimes a good point. The fact that we don't rely on the weaknesses of the model that sometimes struggle to represent extreme events. Although now we are working, of course, at implementing also the models. So perhaps I can say a few words about the perspective while the last slides is showing there. So what we want to do now, of course, we want to move a little bit more towards the attribution of impacts. So I have a few students working now at implementing in the Climameter methodology the mortality estimates for the heat waves, the impacts on the energy sector for the other events such as drought, And then we have including more hazard. As I was saying, I'm working at including hazard from convection. I have a student working on lightnings. I'm working on my own with hail, and I'm working with colleagues in Colombia and in Philadelphia at implementing tornado as hazard for this analog methodology. And of course, the other things that we want to do is that we want to increase the coverage of our studies towards the global south. We have already colleagues that we are involving to do peer-reviewed studies on Africa that will feature the attribution of 30 recent extreme events that happened in Africa in the last 5 years. And as I was saying, Climate Meter is very open in terms of evolving techniques. We have a very good interaction with other attribution frameworks such as the World Weather Attribution, and we want this technique to evolve and to make it, of course, more useful for from a scientific point of view of the population. And then I just finish by saying that, of course, these rapid reports that we publish motivate peer-reviewed studies. You can go on the website and see what we publish as a peer review. And these rapid attribution studies cannot substitute peer-reviewed studies that remain the basis for which and with which we advance our scientific understanding of the climate system. So I thank you very much for your attention, and I'm happy to answer the questions you might have. Many thanks.
Thank you very much, David. I will stop the recording.